What a joy to be invited to be with you in this room, to be with the big people. I actually was with the Lions in the room next door all the last year that we were able to meet with the kids, and I so miss all your little people. My name's Sue Hausmann. If I haven't met you, we've been coming to Grace for about 10 or 11 years. We love Grace, we love the people, we love the pastors, we love everybody, and we just feel it a privilege to be here, and I feel it a real privilege to have been invited to be with you. I'm just going to say thank you, Lord, for this invitation and for this time together. I pray that what I have to say won't seem proud, but will be meaningful, and we'll have some ideas on how life lives. Thank you, Lord. And so basically, when Melanie, now she's not here tonight, but that's how long this goes back, that I got signed up to come and speak for you guys. And I met her in Fry's, and she had the kids in the basket. I love her little boys. And basically, I don't know if you meet me like that. And then, of course, the other person I met, Heather, where are you? Heather, you at Sunday school one day, when I was in with the preschools, you cornered me and you said, "Am I right you have 4 children?"
Yes.
And I said, "Yes, Heather." And she said, "And you made it?" And I said, "Yes, Heather." I said, "You know what? I love my 4 children." But anyway, so that was kind of how I talked to Heather. And then we've had, Liz and I have talked, and you and I have talked. Lindsay and I have worked in preschool a lot together. So what a joy to be with you tonight. And, you know, when people ask me a question like that in Fry's or at Sunday school, you're going to get my life story. So here we are. And for years, it's been my privilege to go out and speak like this and to share the joy of sewing. And I'll be talking a little more about that because that was my second career in life. And more importantly, the joy of life with people, with other people that sometimes really need it. I had a program that I called Are You Fun to Live With? And people used to like that program because I would think it was so important. Or the first one was, how did you get this job? When I knew you were a mommy. And so those are some of the things that I have shared through the years. And today I want to share how God has led me and blessed me through so many life stages. This is my story, from homemaker and mother to executive vice president of the largest sewing machine company in the world, and some of the life lessons along the way. You know, I believe when we ask Jesus into our life and we look to him for his leading, he gives us life opportunities every day. Sometimes we're not really open and looking and thinking about it, but I hope we can talk a little bit more about this. I have a verse, and what I've given you on your table, I don't know if some of you had it yet, but you're going to get it tonight. It's just a list of some verses that have been meaningful to me. And one is 1 Thessalonians 5:16. Rejoice always. Pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. And a lot of times I have to sit down and kind of read some of these verses. My husband Herb, you know, we keep reminding ourselves that life changes. And that hasn't always been the easiest thing. Life changes. Some of those life changes we didn't really like and we didn't want. And women especially, I think, need to be prepared sometimes to reinvent themselves as life changes, as we grow with our family and as our family grows up. But we're going to come back to all that. I grew up on a gravel road out in the country, 30 miles north of Chicago, and my wonderful Christian grandma and grandpa lived in a cottage next to us. And I believe that their influence, I'm confident that they were praying for me and for my family every single day. My grandpa was an invalid. He had ALS, or the slow-moving one of it, for years and years. My grandma weighed 100 pounds, and she cared for him. My dad would go over every night and put him to bed, and he'd go over every morning and haul him out of bed before he'd go to work during the day. So it wasn't easy for my grandma and grandpa. And you know, I want you to hear a verse that my grandma shared with me. She said, Romans 12:12, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulations, and be constant in prayer. And that meant a lot to me at the time. Her favorite hymn was, what a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. And my grandpa's favorite hymn was, "Oh, Master, let me walk with thee." So I was brought up around Christian grandma and grandpa. And basically, they were a great influence in my life. My school was a 2-room school, so there were like 4 grades in each room. And my dad worked a lot, and he built our house as he had time and as he had money to build it. He never had any boys. He was a very talented guy. And we were so happy. We were just talking about that today because our son Bob surprised us and came down yesterday. And basically, he had so much joy with his grandsons. I will share that my dad's biggest bitterness was about God. And he would ask, how would your loving God, and this was later in my life when I knew God and Jesus Christ as my Savior, he said, how would your loving God let my parents bear so much? And they had a mentally retarded daughter, that was his sister. And we would share with my dad. And I'm pleased to say that toward the end, he really came to see Jesus and to know that it wasn't a burden for his parents. His parents loved Jesus, and they turned it over to him. You know, lots of people ask me how I learned to sew. Some of you don't know that I love to sew. My dad was the sewer in our family. He made all our drapes, bedspreads, and he made all the home sewing. He did all the mending. And 2 neighbors on our road, you know, old gravel country road, they started a 4-H club. And I learned to sew and cook and so much more in 4-H and Girl Scouts. And another neighbor lived nearby, and she had 4 little bitty children. And I loved little bitty children, just as I do today. And so she was a fabulous sewer. And I would walk over to her house, and I would help her with her kids. And in return, she would make me clothes, and she taught me how to sew for myself. So people were influencing my life, thank you, Lord, so early in the early days. I mean, who would have thought that her teaching, as I was a child, would be the start of a sewing life skill that would take me so far? My dad did not attend church. My mom was raised in a Protestant church, and growing up, we went to church every Sunday. We went to Sunday school, we went to church, we sang in the choir. I was in the youth group, I was confirmed, I worked in Vacation Bible School, you know. My dad didn't attend church except under pressure from Mom on Easter and Christmas. I look back and I realize that this church that we went to was more into works-based teaching. You had to be a good person to get to heaven. You had to do all these things to get to heaven. I never remember any kind of an invitation as a child and as a young woman to ask Jesus to be my Savior. However, when I was confirmed, the minister wrote in my confirmation Bible, Philippians 2:5. Just the reference, no words. So I looked it up. And of course, that verse is, let this mind be in you. That was also in Christ Jesus. That's the King James. The New International Version, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. I read it in those days, but I really didn't understand it. And I didn't take it into my life as a life verse until many years later. However, at age 10, I did go to a vacation Bible school at a little old-fashioned church in our town, and I learned John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. Well, you know, when we all bowed our heads and we were supposed to hide our eyes, and we were asked if we wanted Jesus as our Savior, we were asked to raise our hand. Well, I raised my hand. Now, I had my eyes peeking, some of my friends did too, but, you know, I truly believe that I did become a child of God that day. And that was years, though, before I really committed my life to him. As a teenager, I was driven to have good grades, straight A's, gotta have straight A's, gotta be perfect, gotta have everyone, you know, like me. I wanted everyone to like me. Not everybody's gonna like me, darn it. To be in every activity possible. But underneath, I was a very unhappy person. Someday, maybe there will be time to tell you about meeting my husband Herb. He was actually in high school, and he was working as a part-time custodian at my grade school when I was entering the 8th grade. Now, my folks, of course, would not let me ride in his car. with him, but he would come over to our house and he'd fish in our pond. Well, one day, I knew he was coming, but my mom and dad made me go with them to some family thing, and my other grandpa was at the house on weekends, and he told her never to come around again, and he didn't. So I went, 8th grade, graduated valedictorian of my class. Of course, there were only 15 in the class, and I entered high school, 11-mile bus trip, and I'll tell you, Herb was gone to the Army. Well, a couple of years later, I'm in high school, Herb calls and asks me out. We began dating. It was not long before we were so in love. Oh my gosh. He too was unhappy at home, and before long, we ran away and got married. I look back and I think, oh, my poor parents. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? My dad had saved $4,000. That was what you needed in 1960 to attend 4 years of college. And he had it in the bank. And of course, I just wanted to get married, and that was my life goal. Our first years together weren't easy. Herb had enough savings when he got back out of the Army that we could assume a loan, and we bought a small home. My dad loaned him his sewing machine to me, and I sewed curtains from our bed sheets and received different things, and Herb's mom gave us fabric to make drapes for the living room, and my dad came over and taught me how to make drapes, and it's one of my fondest memories, after work, him coming over to help me make drapes. However, we were struggling. Herb was brought up in the Catholic Church. Well, he was brought up Catholic, let's put it that way, but his family did not attend church. His mother insisted we meet with a priest after we were married, and I've got here, but that's another story, but I'm just going to share with you that I had said I didn't want to get married in the Catholic Church, so I took the Catholic religion information, so I knew what it was all about, and the priest said I couldn't take it because we were living in sin, and so we left that night with the paperwork we were supposed to fill out so that we could do all this stuff, and we never went back. We lived in that house in that parish for 4 years, and no one ever contacted us. I continued to attend a local Protestant church on Sundays, but Herb's buddies would often visit on Sunday mornings, and they always expected a big breakfast. So of course that would mean I'd miss church. I tried to get back in high school. See, I was a junior. I was in my junior year. I finished my junior year, but we ran away. And my high school wouldn't accept married students then because, quote, you would be a bad influence on other students, unquote. So I finished up school nights, and I got my diploma, and I did some additional school after that. But in the early years, I worked as a nurse's aide in the delivery room, and I loved it. I don't know how I got that job. I went to go take a nurse's aide job. I'm standing in a line with a bunch of ladies after a week's bedpan training stuff, and this woman comes up and she says, "We want you to go up to OB." And this big Mrs. Kurth, the head nurse, she said, "Which one of you is Hausmann?" I'm like, that's me. But I loved it. And guess what? 2 of the nurses, and there were only 2 that I worked with, were both Christians. And so what an impact that had on my life in those early days of my life. And basically, soon, of course, our first child, Herb Jr., was born, and we were thrilled. I was a wife and a mother. My career goal was complete. And basically, Herb was really working a lot of hours, 40 hours in his job, going to IHITE, Illinois Institute of Technology, 2 nights a week. He was studying engineering. He was in the Army Reserves 1 more additional night. So during those early years, I actually took responsibility for a lot of things that had to be done at home. Paying the bills, cleaning the house, of course, and of course, cutting lawn. And all this time, as our life dragged on, going to church and what religion to raise our children in became a looming issue in our marriage. When I would insist they should go to church with me, Herb would ask why I felt the Protestant church was better than the Catholic church. And I truly had no answer, and neither did he. We did not know the Lord in our life. But I prayed a lot, and I played and sang Christian music. But basically, I'm so thankful that God had a plan for us. Our next door neighbors in this little tiny house in Rolling Meadows, Illinois, were a wonderful Christian couple. Can you believe it? They went to church on Sunday morning. They went to Sunday school too. And then they would go back to church on Sunday night. And then they'd go to church on Wednesday night to prayer meeting. And then they'd go to choir practice and they'd do other stuff at the church. Well, that was kind of how we felt at the time. We would look at their family. They had 3 children. Well, they invited us to a Billy Graham crusade in Chicago, and then invited us to their church the next Sunday morning, where we went forward to make God the Lord of our life. We had one little boy. We had another one just on the way. And we realized that even though all these years growing up, we had believed, but we had never received. We had never received. I began reading and studying the Bible. Philippians 2:5, remember that one? Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. That became my life verse. And Herb and I now will celebrate our 61st wedding anniversary next month. We agree. Thank you. We agree there would have been a number of times that it would have been easier to get out of our marriage than to stay in. I encourage you, and I always say this, the first 40 years are the hardest. I'm only kidding. It's probably the first 10 or 20, but anyway. It's wonderful to be where we are today, and I just pray. But basically, we truly believe that turning our lives over to God 3 years into our marriage and looking to Him for direction has been the key to our life together. I think of it this way. We actually transferred ownership of our lives. We transferred our ownership of our lives from us to Him. And so the next years, I loved being a mother. 2 years later, Bob was born. 18 months later, our little daughter, Hope. And Herb's dad passed away during this time. His mother lived with us for a while, so we put off number 4 for a few years. Then Bruce was born 5 years later, so that's the 4. But there was no extra money in these years. It was a different time. I remember we thought if Herb ever made $10,000 a year, we would be on Easy Street. Can you imagine? Well, I sewed virtually everything we wore. And, you know, if our kids wanted to ride one of those little horsey things at the Kmart, Grandma had to be with to pay the quarter because we couldn't really spare the quarter to put him on it. But God blessed us. Don't get me wrong. He blessed us. And our life continued. We bought a bigger home. Our kids started school. Herb got a better salary. But I was such a neat freak. Anybody relate to that? I mean, I wanted an immaculate house. I would buff the floors every day. You know, I wanted everything neat. I wanted all the toys put away. I washed on Monday. I ironed on Tuesday. I wanted things to be just so. I had so many expectations. So many expectations of what our life should be. And I'll tell you, we had some turmoil in these years because of that. We were so busy with life, we didn't find time for God. In fact, I have to share with you, you know, Herb would never make the bed, and he was not a particularly neat person. I'll leave it at that because I don't want you picking on him. But so for 2 years, I was like, okay, we're going to try it the other way. We never made the bed. The dressers were full. After 2 years, I said, okay, I can't live like this. We have to come to some kind of common ground. And today, that common ground on the bed making is, last one out makes the bed. I'm sure you know who that is. And he does it happily. Well, I began using my sewing life skill to do alterations to supplement our family income. And a local women's dress shop referred customers, and many of them asked me to do home deck for them, to make drapes and things like that. And what a lot of wonderful learning opportunities God gave me to build this sewing life skill and to learn so many new things. I believe he was in my life every day, even though sometimes I was only with his mostly on Sunday. I did pray often, and I played and sang Christian music, which at the time was the way I really communicated with God. Some years later, when the kids were in middle school and teenagers, I was tired of sewing for other people. And I said to myself, do I want to spend the rest of my life sewing for people, or do I want to teach them to sew for themselves? I turned to God in prayer, and I prayed for life direction, and the doors opened. During those years, I adopted a second life verse, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that continues to be a verse that I have on my mug and I repeat every day. God opened the doors for me to teach a sewing class at an adult education program at a local community college and at a high school. These classes were a huge success. These people really wanted to start to sew. They were adults. They wanted to sew something they wanted to make, so I let them. I mean, that's what we taught. And many signed up multiple times for the classes. Soon I had the opportunity to go to work teaching and selling sewing machines. And people were sewing in those days, not because they had to. That necessity skill of sewing, where men bought all the sewing machines and everything, that was long gone. These people wanted to create. They wanted to make fun things. They wanted to quilt. They wanted to do some fun sewing. And so there were lots of new techniques, the machine quilting, embroidery, artistry, applique, and more. And I had the opportunity to teach all those. However, I was still so struggling with life. So many things would get me down. My life was a mess. I had to work really hard to be positive, to be a happy wife, and to be a mother. And I did really work at it. Our family life went on, active in our church, our kids' events, day-to-day life, but I was really unhappy. I tried to hide it. Bottom line, I had so many expectations. You see, people around me were not doing what I thought they should be doing. Can anybody relate to that? You know, I had expectations of what I thought my husband should be doing, my kids should be doing, my mom should be doing. You know, they weren't doing it. Well, so many more. I had strong ideas of what our life should be. And I was struggling to change things and struggling to change the people around me. Devotions were hit and miss. I prayed selfish prayers. I was a very busy person. Christian music was my main connection to my time with God. One Sunday, I don't remember what the message was, but there was a call to come forward and to change your life. I went forward that Sunday. My kids were now teenagers, middle school, and a dear friend, someone that I've been singing with for a long time, came up and said, "We will help you." And I looked at him and I said, "Sam, there's no one who can help me except God. I must give this to God, and with His help, I need to change myself." Thus became a time of prayer, Bible reading, and a huge life change in me through him. Colossians 4:2 and 5:6, devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders, others. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversations always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Wow. My greatest life lesson, I'm not giving you a list of some of my life lessons, but my greatest life lesson is you cannot change the people around you. I could not change the people around me, no matter how hard I tried. And I made myself very miserable trying. I can only change myself. And of course, Matthew 19:26 says, with God, all things are possible. And maybe even I could change. And so an amazing thing happened. In changing myself, most importantly, the way I related to people around me, others around me changed. Our life changed. My expectations mellowed. I continued to pray and to work at it. And I realized that other people can't make me happy. It's up to me. My attitude will make or break me. I had to work on so many things, and probably the biggest one was listening. You see, I didn't like to listen. I like to talk. I like to keep going. I like to say a lot of things. And it was about 20, this is true, 20 years into our marriage. Now, I want you to remember that Herb is a mechanical engineer, okay? You ask him the time, he'll build you a clock. So keep that in mind with this story, all right? About 20 years into our marriage, actually that same man, Sam, said to me, Sue, I want to mention something to you. In all the years we've known you, and I went to high school with Herb, he said, I've never heard you let Herb finish a story. Whoa! The scariest part was, it was true. Because you see, I knew what he was talking about, and I could finish the story much faster. I mean, I knew where he was going. He was just taking way too long to finish the story. Are you with me? I mean, good grief, Herb, get with it here. If I told you that there are days that I do this today, when he's telling a story, yeah, this is 61 years. The scariest part was that it was true. I was not listening. I was not listening to my husband. I was not listening to my kids. I was not listening to anyone. I was actually, when people would start talking, I would be thinking about what I was going to say back to them. Does anybody do that? You know, it's like, I know what you're going to say and I want to give you the answer, or I know a better answer. You know, Althea, this week I had lunch with her at the wedding luncheon for Jeannie, and I just love what she said. I've got to see, I wrote it down, Althea. She said, some battles are not worth winning. Oh my. Write that one down. Because I got to tell you, we've all got them. We've all got battles in our life that are not worth winning. Listening, that was the biggest. Now, praying and thinking before speaking. I used to just blurt stuff out. Stick my foot in my mouth. Think before you speak. I don't think this got printed on your thing. I think it just got left off, but it says if you can't be kind, be quiet. If you can't be kind, be quiet. Think before you speak. And of course, patience. I was not a particularly patient person. I was definitely a person who lost my temper. And so was my husband. It's something we both have really worked on in our marriage. And I think a lot of things that we have in our lives may have been examples set by our parents, the parents before us. You never know. But we can't blame them. We can't give them the blame for who we are. We need to look to God and take responsibility. Colossians 4:2 and 5 to 6a, devote yourself to prayer, being watchful and thankful. Let your conversations always be full of grace. Love the name of this church, grace. Wow. What about the little things? I mean, good grief. Every day there's some little thing. How about toothpaste? You know, it was the third, we were married 30 years. And I hated the way he squeezed the, oh my God, hated the way he squeezed the, all of a sudden it hit me. I could buy him his own tube. And so he got his own tube and I got my own tube. You know, we've got to think of creative ways. Crumbs on the floor, you know, the mess. The forgotten birthday. Now, this was really something. This was some years ago. I used to make a really big deal of everybody's birthday. Really big deal. And we used to have parties and cakes, and when Herb would come home from work, you know, we'd sing and we'd have a great party. But of course, my birthday was coming up. Well, you think I would tell them? No, I'm not going to tell them. They should be remembering my birthday, right? Okay, so my birthday day comes along. The kids go off to school. Herb comes home. Nobody's remembered my birthday. Okay, so guess what I'm doing? I'm feeling very bitter and very awful. And I'm feeling mad at them. And my parents were in Florida at the time. And about 9:30 that night, they called from Florida. And when I picked up the phone, I said, oh, thank goodness he remembered. And they said, remembered what? Okay. That was a turnaround for me. It was like, good grief, Sue, quit the pity parties. You know, tell them your birthday's coming up. Plan something special for yourself. Order a cake. And so I really want to say to you, it's not worth thinking someone should be doing something for you and that it should be different. Help them understand it's your birthday. Let them have a party. You know, I truly can't help but tell you there's so many little things, even last week. Okay, I got to tell you about this. Last week, right? Thursday's garbage day, right? And about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I walked out on the patio and Herb was out there and I said, I'm going to go get the garbage can. And he says, No, 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 don't go get the garbage can. I don't want you doing that. I don't want you doing that with your back. Don't get the garbage can. Well, are you going to get it? No, I'm going to get it before I go to bed. It'll be dark then. I was really ticked. I wanted that garbage can up and out of the way. Our homeowners association doesn't like them down on the street after the garbage is picked up. I was really annoyed. Do any of you get annoyed about little stuff like that? Do you let people push your buttons? I confess, I do. Well, guess what happened? Our neighbor came to the door and she had brought up the garbage. No, she called to see if we were okay because she brought up the garbage. So I had to confess to her, I love her. I said, Ronnie, I can't believe that you brought up our garbage can. You can't believe how I was stewing about that. How stupid. You know, I mean, let's face it, is that life or death? Am I letting him push my buttons? Of course I am. I said, I've got here, what about the little things? This does not go away. You must continue to give it to God. And I believe that. You must continue to give it to God. And I did, right after that. I said, God, please forgive me. How stupid that I muddled about that for about the last 2 hours or hour and a half. You know, how ridiculous. Do any of you do stuff like that? Let people push your buttons and let them irritate you? I hope not. But you know what? That's human nature. And God made us with human nature. So often, people get to me. They push my buttons. I try not to allow that to happen in my life anymore. And I tried not to let that happen to me in corporate life, because if you're going to let them push your buttons, that's your choice. Your choice. There's no need. Here's a few little words that I think are important. Work to say good things about others, not bad. Even in private, when you talk to other people. What you say affects you more than it affects them. I really believe that. And you reap what you sow. What you put into the lives of others comes back into your own. And I really believe that one. You know, when we originally talked about this, and when Melanie talked to me, and then when you and I talked, she asked, how in the world did you transition from homemaker and mother into the corporate world? And so that, I think, is more what she wanted me to talk about tonight. So I hope it was okay to tell you all this other stuff, too. But as our children grew up, God opened doors for many new opportunities for me to take jobs that continued to grow me in the sewing industry. And along the way, I realized at some point that my teaching gift could grow other people. I began to offer free sewing classes at an upscale fabric store, and literally hundreds of creative women, excited to learn new techniques and projects, they would come to these classes. And as a result, I sold many sewing machines. A couple of years later, the VP from the sewing machine company came to the store to ask, how do you sell so many sewing machines? I told him I don't sell them, they just buy them because they want to make all this cool stuff. He says, wow, he says, would you consider going to work for the company and traveling all over the country and teaching stores how to teach these classes? And I'm like, travel? Oh my gosh, this sounds like a dream job, right? Oh my gosh. Well, I looked at him and I said, you know what? I said, I still have a 15-and-a-half-year-old at home. And I got to tell you, he does not need a mother, but he deserves one. And then I have a husband at home, and the truth is, he doesn't deserve me, but he needs me. Now, that was sort of a joke, but in a way it wasn't a joke, because I told you that Herb went to school nights for 10 years, and he had never washed anything, he had never fixed a meal, he had never, he had never taken care of a house, and I was going to be traveling all week by plane all over the country. And I just looked at him and I said, there's no way. Herb would run out of underwear almost immediately. And he would starve to death. And so I turned the job down. Well, about a year and a half later, remember I talked about life changes? This was the real biggie for us. You see, we lived on acreage that my grandpa had bought in 1925. And I had grown up there, and now our kids had grown up there. My mom and dad had a home there. We had built a house next door to them. We had such fond memories. we thought for sure each of our children would take an acre and build a house on the pond. Wouldn't you think that? Obviously, it doesn't work like that. Life changes. And Bob, second son, calls from Bethel College and says, hey Mom, I've got this interview. Now don't worry, it's with a guy from California. It's a startup, software company. I am not going to take a job in California, but my professor thinks I should take this interview just for the experience. And of course, you know what happened. Bob ended up in Silicon Valley and is still there today, retired at 35. Now he's on 12 boards, chairman of many of them. He was gone. San Jose. Then Herb Jr., our oldest child, who had our only granddaughter at the time, Britta was 1 year old. They went to our church, so we saw them very often. He calls one night and he says, I've been transferred to Seattle. What? And I'm taking Britta with me and his wife. None of our kids had ever been out of Illinois, virtually, except to go to Minnesota for. Our daughter called from Bethel. She said, Mom and Dad, I found this great job for next year. I'm not going to be coming back home. And then one night, my parents walked over and they said, we've decided to sell our house and move to Green Valley. And so off they went. And within about a month, this youngest son, who now was like 17 in his junior year, and it was May, and he says, Mom, Dad, I have enough credits to graduate this year. I'm not going to do my senior year. I'm going to go to Arizona State. And he said, and I'm going to be near Nanny and Papa. And off he went. Okay, that was pretty traumatic for me. I felt like my life was over. I really did. I mean, my life goal was to get married and raise a family. This is what I wanted to do. And if no one would marry me, I had decided I would be a teacher or a nurse. I mean, I had made that decision. But Herb found me. But basically, now my job was over. And I looked at Herb and I said, what am I going to do? My job is over. And Herb looked at me and he said, I know you wanted to take that traveling job. Why don't we try it for a year? And so Herb gets the credit for encouraging me to step out and try, and God gets the credit for giving me the opportunity and the ability. So I started my second career. What a learning curve to be in the structure and politics of the corporate world. In those days, the sewing machine industry was a man's world. In the beginning, I traveled all over the place by plane. I presented trainings to store owners, teaching people how to bring people into their stores. Over the next couple of years, though, my job opportunities continued to grow with the company, and I became the education manager, hiring for a job. Mostly young people right out of college, but a lot of young mothers would come and would interview for this traveling job that would keep them on the road for 3 weeks. Now, I wasn't allowed to ask if they were married or if they had children, but they'd bring things they had made, and they'd have little kids' clothes, and I'd say, wow, who'd you make these for? Oh, my little girl, well, you have kids, how old are your kids? 5, 3, and 1. And I'm like, you're going to be on the road 3 weeks a month? I mean, wait a minute here. And so I would say, okay, I might get sued for this, but I need to step down as Sue Hausmann, education manager. Can I talk to you as Sue Hausmann, wife and mom? Your kids are going to grow up before you know it. They're going to be all grown up. I said, go to work for a store. I'll give you some ideas of how you can build your skills to come to work for us when your kids are older. But stay home with them while you can, because time is so short, and if you can, do it. See, I believe women today can have it all. They don't necessarily have to have it all at once. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. I kept really, really busy. I produced the public television series America Sews. It ran in 90 million households for 19 years. And then we did a PBS series called So Young, So Fun for several years for children. And then we did a quilting series, America Quilts Creatively. I wrote 33 books on sewing and quilting techniques and projects, and tried to work my testimony into those books as people would read it. They call me an edutainer, for what it's worth, and I do have cards up here if anybody wants to know how to get a hold of me, or you'd like to call me for something. I brought business cards so that you can take one home with you. But I truly believe that God has blessed me with the greatest gift. Now, I'm running out of time, guys. Can I keep going a little longer, Melanie, or do we need to quit? Or not, Melanie? Keep going a little bit? I'll try to go. I guess, you know what? I'll start talking fast. Well, during this time, I did continue to be promoted, and I found that my gift was to inspire and grow people and to encourage people and to build them up and help them be the best they can be. And this has been my mission for the last 35 years. I basically continued to be promoted and was the first woman vice president in the sewing industry. Now, I want to say all of this is not to promote me. it's to say to you, there are so many opportunities, and God is in them. And He has ability to guide you into wonderful things that you could be doing. It was a challenge to be a woman in management, the only woman in management on this team. And during the time we had a management consultant come in, and he asked me, what do you consider to be your greatest accomplishment? I said, no question. I had a full-time career raising a family, caring for a husband and a home for 20 years. And then I had the opportunity to turn my love of sewing into a full-time job and growing people. So in many cases in corporate America, I talk about how women think differently. I used to come in early in the morning onto the dock, and one of the dock workers said, do you know what they call you down here? And I said, no. And he said, Mother Superior. Those are all more stories. We must be up to the challenge of being a woman. And I talked to my son a little bit today because things have changed so much since I originally put this together. But I hired lots of people out of college, and they kept saying, I'm not getting respect around here. I'm not getting respect. And I pointed out to them that you don't get respect. You earn respect. And one of my early stories was the first year that I was made the temporary education manager. We had two wonderful young women that were college degreed in our marketing department, and they wanted me to schedule educators for the American Home Economics Association convention, but they said I couldn't be one of those. And I said, why would that be? And she said, oh, someone might ask you where you went to college, and it would be an embarrassment for the company if you told them that you didn't go to college. The next year, she came, same girl, came in. You need to be one of them. You need to schedule, but you need to be one of them. I felt honored. The next year I was a keynote speaker at the same convention. So you earn respect, there's no question. As the years went by, our kids married, they started families. We're so blessed. Our 4 children have blessed us with 10 grandchildren, aged 12 to 35, and now 8 great-grandkids, minus 1 month to 6. So one will be coming in another month. But I couldn't have done without her support, and I want to just go on to say that I talked to Bob about this today because opportunities for women have really changed, but he said, men in business, he said, today I couldn't ever say this because I'd get fired, but he said, men in business expect and demand women must be equals in professionalism, integrity, appearance, enthusiasm for what they do, energy, concentration. You have to remember that visiting, gossiping, personal telephone calls, baby pictures, magazines, makeup catalogs, they have no place in this corporate setting except at lunch breaks and during your social time. Of course, men will, forgive me, but they would sit in the management meetings, and guess what? They talk about sports, but never mind, I didn't say that. Our son Bruce said, to many, women in business are emotional and reactive decision makers. We need information-based decisions. And I have a lot more on this. I'm not going to go into this. I'm just going to say that another thing that I have found, and I do not do this to make myself look good, but the one learning lesson again was the better you make others look, the better you look. And so when there were challenges, people would tell me that someone criticized me or did this or did that, and I'd say, do you believe it? Is that the style of managing that I've been doing? And they'd say, well, no. And I'd say, well, then don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I had a song, it's called Do They See Jesus in Me? And I'm not going to do the whole thing. Is the face that I see in the mirror the one I want others to see? Do I show the way that I walk in my life, the love that you've given to me? My heart's desire is to be like you in all that I do, all I am. Do they see Jesus in me? Do they recognize your face? Do I communicate your love and your grace? Do I reflect who you are in the way I choose to be? Do they see Jesus in me? And that goes a lot longer. About 15 years into my career with DSM, God had a wonderful plan because Herb was very ill. He had Crohn's, he was bloated, he was sick, he was a project engineer, he had lots and lots of stress. 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your cares on him, for he cares for you. And because I was blessed with this great job, benefits, Herb was able to retire. Here's the really exciting thing. Herb has not had a Crohn's, and he was having them like every day practically. He has not had a Crohn's attack since he retired. Now I point out to him that that's because his new boss is much less stressful than his old boss. But I was spending a great deal of time in Sweden because I worked for Hausmann sewing machines and new product development. Herb actually traveled with me for the next 15 years. The company paid the dime and he got to go with me. Of course, we shared meals sometimes, but we stayed in the same hotel room. They called him the hardest working unpaid employee of VSM, and I so appreciated having his support. And we can show you presser feet that he invented. You know, he was an engineer, so he'd go up into the engineering department with the guys. Originally, I put this program together for people struggling with the empty nest and women like me who feel their life is over when their family's raised. But so many women would come up to me after the program and they would say, I was meant to be here tonight. You know, my mom brought me, and I'm a VP or I'm a manager or I have this great job. I have 3 really young children and I want to take a few years off to be with them. And my parents, usually their parents who paid for their education, sometimes their husband, say, I'll never get back into my VP position if I take time off now. And you're telling me that you started this all when you were 44. And so it was really fun to be able to share with those. When we talked about this, isn't it wonderful that we know God has a plan for our lives, now and forever. And God gives us opportunities at every life stage all the time. Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. God gives us all talents, abilities, opportunities. For me, it was the life skill of sewing. It's been my joy and privilege to turn that into a real job and to share it along with the joy of life with so many others. More recently, truthfully, I've been struggling a little bit because we're at a new life stage. We're getting old, and it's very different, but I'm really excited. And of course, many of you know, I'm not going to go into the story, I lost my sight 3 years ago. And many of you were praying for me, and I thank you for that. God gave me my sight back. Thank you, Lord. And basically, that's another whole story. But we now lead a small group, and we help neighbors and widows, and I've been the vaccine registration person, so people keep calling and saying, I can't figure this out, so I've been helping them with that. By the way, we got the second one yesterday and we're fine. But even now, as life changes again, I know God has me in his hands. And so this song has really given me so much peace. Because the Lord is my shepherd, I have everything that I need. He lets me rest in meadows green, and he leads me beside the quiet stream. He keeps on giving life to me, and he helps me to do what honors him the most. Even when walking through the dark valley of death, I will never be afraid, for he is close beside me, guiding all the way. He spreads a feast before me. In the presence of my enemies, he welcomes me as his special guest. With blessings overflowing, his goodness and unfailing kindness will be with me all of my life, and afterward I will live with him forever in his home. So regardless of where you are today, take it from me, there is life after 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and now almost 80. And I hope you didn't take this as boasting. I did not mean it to come across that way. I hope you will take it in the spirit that it was intended, to emphasize that God is always with you. Every day is what we make it. Opportunity is everywhere and at every time and every age. We can have all God wants for us. Every day brings not only new opportunities, but new challenges in our life. I'm not going to go into a lot of challenges here. I've got a $50 bill up here. Keep the memories with you. It was hard to lose my folks. And I know I was old, and I should have been okay. They had a wonderful life, and they were old. Well, somebody asked me about this $50 bill. It's 1934. When my dad left home in Park Ridge, Illinois, to go to Cleveland, Ohio for air conditioner school, his father gave him, this is 1934, so this was quite a bit of money, gave him this $50 bill and said, I want you to keep this with you to know we love you. You'll always have a home here. I want you to always have money that you can come home and be with your family. And when my dad died, this was in his wallet. I knew that, and I of course immediately went and got it. But it reminds me of the fact that, wow, God has us in his hands. And he's not giving us a $50 bill. He's giving us salvation. He's giving us life after death. And so he loves us, just like my grandpa loved his son. God loves you, and God loves me. So remember to smile, greet people, be kinder and gentler than necessary. For everyone you meet is fighting some sort of battle. There's no question. Are you fun to live with? Think about it. And pray. If you really can't do things about things and you feel you just can't stand it, and I have those things, pray and give it to the Lord. Foster care, listen more. I have more, but I'm not going to go any further here today because I know I've overdone my time, and I certainly didn't mean that. I really went through this much faster at home. But whatever you're dealing with today, I wanted to show one thing to you. I had a story about how 1 Corinthians 13, that's what this picture is, how it fell off the wall when they slammed the door when I was angry, and it was about a couple that her husband had passed, and I just sat down and cried, and I was so mad at Herb about something. Who knows? I don't even remember what I was mad about. Came in and slammed the door. 1 Corinthians 13 went down to the floor, and I opened the mail, and my friend's husband had died. And I'm going, God forgive me. God forgive me. Why did I lose my temper? But I always say, try to find creative ways to deal with challenges. Now, this little lap pillow quilt, and I'm going to share this with you because a lot of you have mother-in-laws, and our daughter never married, so I have 3 daughter-in-laws, and sometimes that can be challenging. I will tell you, today they love me, and I'm so pleased that they love me. But we had our struggles some years, and we would go to this daughter-in-law's house, and there were always all these pictures of her parents. And I would say, you don't have any pictures of Herb now here. There's no pictures of Herb and me. She'd say, I don't have any good pictures of you. So I'd send some pictures. Well, there'd never be any pictures. And I was not going to let this ruin our relationship, okay? So we took a picture of Herb and I with each grandchild at Thanksgiving time. Herb printed it on fabric, which you do this in your inkjet printer. And then I made them each one of these, I call them the lap pillow quilt. So it's a pillow that they can put on their bed, and then it opens up into a blanket. So they each had one, and we would write a note. I always write a note on the back here. I just sent my 16-year-old granddaughter one with her. She has a Pismo. It's a bearded dragon. So I took a picture of her with her bearded dragon and put it on it. But anyway, you get the idea. Find a creative way to solve some of those issues that you're really struggling with. In this case, this got a picture of us right on those kids' bed. They took it to kindergarten, they took it to college, they took it to it was great. So whatever you're dealing with today, I'm delighted that you're here. And I'm delighted that you're sharing the joy of fellowship and life with one another. And I'm delighted that you're learning more about our Savior through MOPS. I challenge you to take the joy of Christ back to your home, to your friends, to your family, and to strangers that you meet and you impact every day. And I'd like to pray, Lord, open our eyes to who you are and what you're doing in our lives. Help us to see others through your eyes and help them to see you through me. So come on up, ask questions. I know you've got some questions, anything I can do. Any questions that I can answer right off the bat? Okay.